Patel, during your confirmation hearing, you made several important commitments. For instance, you told Senator Coons there will be no politicization at the FBI. There'll be no retributive actions taken by any FBI should I be confirmed as FBI director. So let me ask you very specifically, did you ever take any action to terminate or discipline an FBI agent or employee in whole or in part as retribution for being part of an investigation of Donald Trump or January 6th?
No.
You also committed, you assured Senator Blumenthal, all FBI employees will be protected against political retribution. So you're testifying today that you played no role in the firing of even a single FBI agent for political retribution.
None for political retribution.
And if any FBI agent said you did, they would be lying. Is that your testimony?
I'm only speaking to my actions. Everybody is allowed to make their allegations.
Oh, no, these are allegations against you.
And
so, Mr. Patel, if FBI, senior FBI agents or employees said that you were firing them for political retribution reasons because of the cases they were assigned, you're saying they would be lying.
Imagine walking into a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing and hearing the head of the FBI say with a straight face that politics has nothing to do with the firings inside his bureau, while the names circling the room are Donald Trump, January 6th, Epstein files, classified documents, whistleblowers, and senior FBI agents suddenly pushed out of their jobs. That is not a small personnel dispute. That is not office drama with badges and letterhead. That is the equivalent of a fire chief standing in front of a burning building and telling everyone there is no smoke, no heat, and definitely no one holding matches. So the question is simple. When Kash Patel promised there would be no politicization at the FBI, was that a principle or was it just a nice sentence polished for confirmation day? This hearing becomes tense because Kash Patel is not some random political commentator shouting from the cheap seats. He is presented here as the FBI director, the person responsible for an agency that can investigate citizens, gather evidence, execute search warrants, protect national security, and shape public trust in federal law enforcement. Senator Chris Coons and Senator Richard Blumenthal were not asking him about gossip. They were asking whether FBI employees would be protected from political retaliation, especially agents tied to investigations involving Donald Trump or January 6th.
Now to FBI Director Kash Patel, who has fired at least 6 agents tied to the 2022 search of President Trump's. That's what 6 people familiar with the matter tell NBC News. But 3 of those sources say at least 10 employees were ultimately dismissed.
And Patel's answer sounded clean. No retribution, no political firings, no role in punishing anyone for working the wrong case. But clean answers are easy when nobody lays the documents on the table. The pressure begins when the question changes from abstract promise to specific conduct. Did Kash Patel ever terminate or discipline an FBI agent in whole or in part because that agent worked on a Trump-related investigation? He said no, then narrowed the answer, then leaned on phrases like standards, constitutional oath, and mission. That is where the moral problem starts, because those words sound noble, but they do not explain why the shadow of retaliation keeps landing on the same group of people. Now the hearing stops being a polite exchange and starts looking like a cross-examination, because Senator Durbin's line of pressure cuts straight through the soft language.
All FBI employees who they identified who had worked on cases against President Trump would be removed from their jobs. Did you tell that to someone at the FBI?
Say that I would remove people for case assignments?
That people that were identified as having worked on cases against President Trump would be removed from their jobs. Did you tell that to someone at the FBI?
People are not removed for
just
case
answer my
assignments.
question. Just answer my question.
Kash Patel can repeat, no political retribution, as many times as he wants, but the question is not whether he knows the correct sentence to say under oath. The question is whether his actions, his timing, his denials, and the firings around him line up with that sentence. And that is where the problem starts to bleed through the walls, because the agents reportedly pushed out were not random employees who forgot to file paperwork or showed up late to training. They were people connected to investigations involving Donald Trump, January 6th, classified documents, and other politically explosive cases that no FBI director should be touching with even the smell of revenge. So let's put this in plain American English. When a man promises the Senate that the FBI will not become a political weapon, then agents connected to investigations of his political patron start getting removed. The burden is not on the public to pretend that pattern is invisible. The burden is on Kash Patel to explain clearly, specifically, and without hiding behind bureaucratic fog, why those people were fired, who approved it, what documents supported it, and whether anyone inside the White House or Trump's political circle had influence over it. Instead, what the audience hears is a familiar government escape hatch. Standards, constitutional oath, mission, words that sound serious but can also become a velvet curtain thrown over ugly facts. Because when every controversial firing is described with the same noble vocabulary, the vocabulary stops explaining the decision and starts protecting the decision maker. This is where prosecutorial mode matters, because the receipts
Patel had, as you
do
know,
not sit
already
alone.
sparked controversy by taking the FBI's private plane to see his girlfriend perform the national anthem at a Pennsylvania wrestling event. He was seen chugging beers, celebrating with the U.S. men's hockey team on a trip that was supposed to be official business. Beyond the questions about whether Patel is focused on the job, what's your sense? Do you think he can survive these questions about having a great time on the taxpayers' dime?
First, Patel made confirmation commitments to Senator Coons and Senator Blumenthal, saying there would be no politicization and no retributive actions at the FBI. Second, he later faced direct questions about whether agents or employees were removed because of their connection to Trump-related or January 6th investigations. And he denied political retaliation while refusing to fully own every allegation around him. Third, reports and whistleblower claims described a pattern of FBI personnel being removed after involvement in sensitive Trump-related cases, including classified documents matters. Fourth, the courtroom angle adds even more pressure, because the source material claims a judge compared Patel's sworn statements with actual documents and found that the story did not match the record. That is not just a contradiction. That is the kind of institutional fracture that makes ordinary people ask whether rules still mean anything when powerful people are involved. A normal employee who gives a false explanation in court does not get to call it context, miscommunication, or media noise. A normal citizen does not get to wave away documents by saying the reports are unfair, the questions are political, or the allegations are inconvenient. So why should the FBI director, the person sitting at the top of the agency that investigates false statements, obstruction, records disputes, and public corruption, get a softer standard than the people his agency investigates? And then comes the most damaging part, the things Patel does not say. He does not give the public a clean list of each fired agent, the exact cause for each termination, the internal review behind each decision, and the safeguards used to prevent political retaliation. He does not explain why the firings appear to gather around cases touching Donald Trump, rather than being scattered across ordinary performance issues inside the Bureau. He does not offer the kind of transparent, document-backed answer that would kill the suspicion immediately. Instead, he leaves a vacuum. And in Washington, a vacuum around power is never empty for long. It fills with fear, whistleblowers, leaks, denials, and the ugly suspicion that loyalty has replaced law. That is why this hearing feels bigger than one official having a bad day under questioning. It feels like watching the referee grab the ball, change the score, and then lecture the crowd about sportsmanship. The FBI exists because the public agrees to give one federal agency extraordinary power. But that agreement depends on a basic promise. The badge follows evidence, not political orders. When Kash Patel's words say independence, but the pattern around him suggests protection, retaliation, and silence, the moral question becomes impossible to dodge. If the people who investigated power can be punished by power, then what exactly is left of accountability? And this is where the story leaves the hearing room and enters something much more dangerous: the slow collapse of institutional trust. Because the FBI is not supposed to be a private security team for any president, any party, any donor class, or any political movement. It is supposed to be the place where evidence matters more than anger, where documents matter more than loyalty, and where an agent can investigate a powerful man without wondering whether his own career will be burned down afterward. That is the basic bargain. The public gives the FBI extraordinary power, and in return, the FBI is supposed to give the public independence, discipline, and truth. But listen carefully to the gap between what Kash Patel says and what remains unanswered. He says the firings were about standards. He says people failed to uphold their constitutional oath. He says the mission of the FBI had to be protected. Those are heavy words, and on paper, they sound like the kind of language every law enforcement leader should use. But the problem is not the beauty of the words. The problem is the missing proof behind them. Because when senior agents tied to politically sensitive investigations are removed, the public does not need poetry. The public needs receipts. Show the performance records. Show the disciplinary memos. Show the review process. Show who recommended termination, who approved it, and whether anyone outside the FBI had any influence. A serious FBI director does not answer a crisis of trust with fog. He answers it with documents clean enough to survive daylight. And that is the point Patel never fully escapes. He wants the audience to believe this is just normal internal management, just a director cleaning up a bureau, just leadership enforcing discipline. But normal management does not usually arrive wrapped in allegations of political retaliation, courtroom contradictions, whistleblower claims, and agents connected to Trump-related investigations getting pushed out of the door. That combination does not smell like routine housekeeping. It smells like a message being sent. And the message, if the allegations are true, is brutal. Investigate the wrong person, touch the wrong file, follow the wrong evidence, and your badge may not protect you. That is how independent law enforcement dies, not always with one dramatic order shouted across a room, but with quieter signals. A firing here, a denial there. A vague phrase about standards. A sealed-looking explanation that turns out not to say what the official claimed it said. And suddenly every honest agent learns the new rule without anyone having to write it down. This is the moral scene that should bother everyone, even people who do not like the FBI, even people who believe past investigations into Donald Trump were unfair, even people who think Washington has been corrupted for years, because the solution to a politicized system is not to politicize it harder in the opposite direction. The solution to selective justice is not revenge justice. The solution to distrust is not replacing one suspected abuse with another suspected abuse and then demanding applause because your side now controls the machinery. My view is simple. Any FBI director who wants public trust must be more transparent than his critics, not more slippery. He must over-document controversial decisions, not bury them under slogans. He must protect career agents from political pressure, not leave them wondering whether their next assignment could become a personal risk. And he must understand that the FBI's credibility is not restored by loyalty to a president. It is restored by loyalty to the law. That is why this hearing matters beyond Kash Patel. It asks whether institutions can still restrain power, or whether power now simply captures the institution and teaches it to speak in legal language. It asks whether constitutional oath still means duty to the country, or whether it has become a decorative phrase people use while punishing anyone who becomes inconvenient. And it asks whether the American public is supposed to accept a system where the same agency that investigates false statements can be led by someone accused of making statements that do not match the record. That is the part that should make the room go quiet. Not because one senator scored a good television moment, not because one official looked uncomfortable, but because the entire structure depends on a belief that law enforcement is not personal. Once that belief is gone, every investigation becomes a political threat, every firing becomes a warning, and every denial sounds less like an answer